ding dong, wedding bells on April morn, carve my name on a moss-covered stone, dear moss-covered stone. Peace, 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 wars will cease. We must learn to live together. Peace, peace, peace. Nobody meet your dream, no money have I none. Still I will be married. Hey ho, nobody home. Ding dong, ding dong.
It's called 3 Times Around the Long Way.
The work in this show is called Preposition and Prosthesis.
The title is The Central Mountain, and the Central Mountain is everywhere.
I'm not sure if I have a title right now.
The title of the show, Resonating Bodies, is taken from a quote by arts writer, critic Jan van Wert, who talks about how kind of shared body of work or a platform where people engage is a resonating body and a site where kind of ideas are shared.
I'm making twin stages. And the stages are life-size stages that if they were built in a space that would allow for them to rest on the floor, then they would be active stages so that bodies or a body could get up and act on the stage. But instead, these stages are built so that the dimensions are based on the in-between spaces of the columns that are in Gallery 1 and Gallery 2 of the Soap Factory, except that the stages are built at a tilt or a lean, so they can't rest on the ground. It's built as if it was slid into the space, but slid into the space at a lean or at a tilt. So it can't rest because the dimensions of the stage itself as a height, width, and depth won't allow, the arc of it won't allow it to swing down and come to a rest. In this particular project here at the Soap Factory, it's really important to me that it's a 1-to-1 scale and it becomes a monument, but the 2x4s are the 2x4s that I would use in the regular stage. So as opposed to it being a model, which would never really ask for the body to be on it, this one has to be built as if it could be in use.
You want to collect up some legs for this, so once we get it up there, we can put some legs under it right away.
Stormy, you got a drill? So it'll be just as sturdy, it'll be just as strong, except that it's out of commission. It's put at rest because it's leaning.
Stay out here, turn the compressor off.
Okay.
Here we go.
Came off?
So it's like I'm a giant and I built these stages and I slide them into the space, but when I slide them into the space, I slide it in at a lean so it can slide in, but its dimensions disallow it to come to rest. So they refuse the actor. It's like the stages can't come to rest, so the body or the viewer or the actor can't get on the stage, and so they're out of commission. And while the stage itself implies an active platform for acting or for presenting or for performing, these stages are performing themselves by not allowing a viewer or an actor or a performer to actually use them as they would be used otherwise.
Roses dead and gone, dead and gone. Oh, poor bird, take thy flight high above the sorrow of this dark night. Mother, Father.
So basically we're in the process of installing our piece right now, and what it is, it's a piece that exhibits a choir or an area where a choir would assemble.
using various sized stools. And what we're going to do is, over the period of the exhibition, we're going to have volunteers come in and actually donate or sing a piece of a 16th century folk hymn. And we're going to have them sing this part of the song, and then we're actually going to have speakers that hang from the ceiling. And so they're going to come in one at a time, sing, and then these speakers will actually play back their actual voice individually. So this choir will sort of build up over the exhibition. And we have an amazing sound artist here who's more of a wizard than anything.
Our sound wizard.
Our sound wizard, Michael Caselli, who's basically getting all of these speakers to be able to play everyone's individual voice.
The project needs 60 discrete sources, which creates a lot of problems because there's no way to do that. There's no way to fake that. It's 60 discrete sources, it's 60 speakers, it's 60 sets of wires, it's 60 outputs to something. And came up with the idea of getting these MP3 players from Amazon.com that were inexpensive, and then hacking those. So everything here is basically a hack. I built these boxes, got these little amplifiers, you know, did all the soldering. It's pretty, I mean, it's pretty complex as far as the structure. There's like lots of little MP3 players inside there. And then, you know, you have all your wires coming out, and that goes to all the speakers. So this represents one whole riser section. This is 20 speakers. And so basically I took all the chips and put the same sound on them, and then they all come out through here, and it's all being run by a computer power supply, which will give me the correct voltage for two different things.
Ding dong, wedding bells on April morn, carve my name on a moss-covered stone, dear moss-covered stone.
Jillian and I have been working together for over a year now, and one of the themes that has sort of come up again and again in our process is this sort of interest in the way that groups assemble, and the sort of concern around voice, and how we have this sense that there's been perhaps something a little bit lost in the loss of the kind of assembly of the voice. And so one of the places where that's actually preserved is in the choir setting. And so in a couple of projects that we're working on, we've been assembling a sort of choir, a kind of modified choir situation. Mm-hmm. And we're really interested in the idea of the voice being sort of separated from the actual embodied vocalist, and how haunting that could be in a space like this, separated from the individual that would actually be standing on the risers. And so the voices will be kind of floating through the space, each one attached to an individual speaker. Sort of form this kind of army of voices that come together, but no individual will have been actually in the space together.
And then, you know, upon the completion of the piece, someone will be able to go up and actually, you know, listen to their specific voice coming out of a specific speaker, which is, I think, going to be pretty neat.
Yeah, so we've got this, there's a grid, it's like a metal grid that will actually be hanging over each section of riser, and from the individual squares we'll have a tiny little wire that will hang down, and the speaker is about 3 or 4 inch speaker. That will be hanging right about where mouth height would be. So it should actually sound very much like the choir that was actually assembled together.
And so a participant would come in. These stools are actually going to be painted kind of a golden color. We have a color scheme going on. So imagine them one color. Through the course of the exhibition, the first set of people 20 people will sing on this side, and then the second round this side, and the third round this side. So it'll sort of, we're really interested in this kind of layering of bodies and material and sound. They will sing along with an actual sort of projection that will project the words, almost like karaoke.
Funeral bells, September morn, Rose, Rose is dead and gone.
I have a studio in the industrial corridor, and I spent so much time in the industrial corridor in Brooklyn that I kind of looked around at what the vernacular art is around there. the thing that I noticed the most was these muffler sculptures outside of auto body shops. They're very popular in Mexico, and a lot of the people working in the industrial corridor in Brooklyn are Mexicans, and that's how they make art.
Thinking about putting some hair. Yeah, made of what? Like that?
I'll be making these muffler sculptures, and I'm going to kind of source all the parts from around town, around here. The form kind of comes first because it has its own energy to it. It has a certain heavy-handed craft, a speedy kind of rhythm to the making. So that's always interested me about in terms of like Americana and roadside vernacular sculpture, because it has this special, very untrained cadence to it.
In the space, there will be a number of stools, cushioned stools to sit on, hacked from IKEA, and those are functional to sit on, and they're material, and they are slip covered in fabric that is printed with QR codes that are a kind of decoration on that surface, and also are functional and direct anyone who chooses to click on those with a clicking device, will direct them to a set of videos that are made in response to the works in the exhibition, the works by other artists, and the larger themes of the show to do with interaction, with participation, with implied performance and explicit performance.
Video didactics that were kind of, they were really tight shots of her hands doing this kind of...
In that first meeting in January, the willingness I saw from the other artists in the show to sort of lean into things that we normally try to be very safe about as artists, not stepping into someone else's territory. I mean, we'll see what happens now once these things are seen. But I feel like that's one of the permissions of this show that I think is a really important one, that we can look at things to do with interaction, to do with participation, to do with the relationship of artist and audience, and lean in or even intentionally produce ones that we think are problematic as a way to find something out about them. I mean, the QR codes, I think, are the strangest thing in the world. And when I'm a viewer in a gallery, I'm really ambivalent about them. And so this is, you know, for me to lean into something that I'm really ambivalent about as a way of finding something out about it has been interesting, because I'm uncomfortable with a lot of it. I would think I might be uncomfortable with a lot of the work I've made for the show, but that feels like a way to get new information right now.
All right. Scanning. YouTube. Oh, for cute.
The videos in the exhibition are an extension of this curiosity I've had about what is possible in the realm of explanation when one forbids oneself words. What's possible when we're just looking at movements of hands manipulating objects, a kind of really like early symbolic language that has something in common with children's play, has something in common with, I think, this very basic way in which we encounter the things around us. And so in these little videos, I try to get at some essential relation or dynamic within these larger questions in the show of participation and of interaction. And then different ones will be then linked via the QR codes to the other artist projects in ways that I hope acts as a kind of, well, in ways that play with the opportunity to see this video as both a distraction or a kind of out from actually engaging with what's in front of you, and possibly in an interesting way, a way back in. So everything in the videos has been stolen from other artists in the show. So I'm using as the kind of main alphabet these stools in various states of decay. The stool taken very directly from Sara and Jillian's work. And the stool became something that I found it really useful to think with when I was thinking about participation and what do you need for something to stand? What kinds of supports and structures do you need? Colors come from other artists in the show. Materials, plywood comes in from other artists in the show. There's a particular shape that you see in Conrad's work and that you see in Kelly's drawings of her work or in photographs of those stages, a kind of parallelogram that shows up again and again in the works in the show. And so the kind of abstract stage that most of these small videos or explanations, wordless explanations take place on is a kind of framed out parallelogram of a sort that's taken directly from those works. So for me, it's been really fun to have that constraint and permission that everything comes from somewhere else. So really to think mostly about the relationships and not about inventing something new. But what can I do with these stolen pieces? And we'll see if everyone's okay with that.
Shapes that push sound in certain ways, and then allowing musicians and artists to interpret the space in whatever way they want to. It'll be open source in terms of what sounds are played in it, but it's important that people just kind of use it to listen to the room differently. There's kind of three zones that are connected aesthetically to each other, and also sonically. So they kind of they're aimed at each other. So as an audience member or as a musician, you can, as you move around the space, you hear the way sound changes. So as you're sort of, examining how the thing is built and sort of just as a sculptural form, you actually are receiving audio information as well, that the viewers and participants in terms of sound makers can manipulate and explore these shapes. So there's kind of like cornucopia shapes that sort of direct sound. Kind of like, I'm sure in like science centers we've all seen those sort of elliptical or parabolic reflectors, so you can whisper and hear someone across the room, and that's just sort of like the way the sound is directed is going right back to a focal point. I can't predict what's going to happen with these structures, but the point is to kind of explore them and then find your little sweet spot for whatever type of sound you're making. The way the piece works is that people use it to explore sound. Now, if it means they're like sitting in the thing and yelling at it, then that's fine. But if they have equipment, electrical equipment, if they're in a band or whatever, they're welcome to come in and use the different stations.
Pleasures and count its many tears, while we all sup sorrow with the poor. There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh, hard times come again no more. It's the song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered.
Comes out of an interest that I had in exploring the position of sculpture in a world that increasingly demands projects to engage an audience. And I got interested in how art is sort of the demands on art to be more and more performative, and started looking at people who worked in sculpture, and had surrounding me a number of artists who were working in this way, where they were creating large bodies of work in sculpture that were performative or had this sort of audience engagement aspect to them, or at least engaged questions about audience engagement. All of these artists I've worked with before, so I kind of arrived at putting this group of artists together. It was kind of serendipity because Ben Haywood was talking about the challenges of finding big sculpture for the soap factory, and I said, wow, I've got a show filled with big sculpture, and proposed this idea to him. In a really practical sense, these are all artists who do work big. They have a hard time finding a home for their work, you know, in sort of standard exhibition venues, let alone having a group show of really large scale work like this. So it's a pretty special opportunity for everybody.
Oh, she'd be on fire!
As we extend ways, we must lay on together, child is born. I will be my mother's Jack. I will be my father's Jill. Still I will be a Halloween hill. Nobody will come, dum, dum, dum. Join yourselves a happy horn. Come my name, Moscow Stone, Moscow Stone. Peace, peace, peace. Take thy slice. I have loved the sorrow of this star.